I picked up a hitchhiker once during my years in college, and it was one of the weirdest days of my life. I was born and raised in the same town for 19 years, only moved away for college, to the big city, about an hour and 20 minutes away. After completing my freshman year, I packed up my dorm and hit the road for home, where I'd spend the next couple of months relaxing, maybe working, before the next semester picked up again in the fall. The highway stretched out before me like a familiar friend, its twists and turns etched into my memory like a well-worn map. I'd driven this route countless times, from my hometown to the city and back again, the miles blurring together like a well-rehearsed script. But on this particular trip, something different stood out. A lone figure, standing out on the side of the road, thumb outstretched in a futile bid for attention. He was almost standing on his tippy toes, really waving that arm out into the road. Never had I ever seen anything like it, so I figured it was just his method of waving down a car. At first, I really thought nothing of it, assuming it was another hapless soul trying their luck on the busy highway. But as I drew closer, something about that guy's demeanor just struck a chord with me. He looked lost, not just stranded, but genuinely adrift, like a ship without an anchor or a rudder. His clothes were clean, if not a little rumpled. His eyes held this hint of desperation that tugged at my sympathies. He couldn't have been much older than me, and for a moment, I envisioned myself out there, desperate in the sun, hoping a kind soul might stop, even just for a second. Before I knew what I was doing, I was pulling over, tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. The hitchhiker's eyes lit up with gratitude as he approached my window. As he got closer, I could start to see some of the finer details. Indeed young, right around my age, very clean, as if he showered this morning, but just very fidgety. Something a little off about his demeanor. "Hey, thanks for stopping, man," he said, his voice laced with relief. "I'm just trying to get to the next town over. I had this stupid fight with my girlfriend. I need to get home before she does something stupid." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite myself. "Sorry to hear that," I said, trying to sound non-committal. "But I guess I am headed that way, so I can give you a lift." His face relaxed into this grateful smile. "Thank you, man. I owe you one." As he climbed into the passenger seat, I couldn't help but notice the faint scent of sweat and anxiety clinging to him just like a shroud. His eyes darted around my car, taking in the familiar surroundings with this mixture of curiosity and unease. He looked like an animal caught in a trap or something. I didn't really know what to make of it. "So, what's your name?" I asked, trying to break the tension. "John," he replied, his voice a little hesitant. "And you are?" I gave him my name, and that seemed to put him at ease, at least a little bit. As we pulled back onto the highway, the silence between us grew thick and heavy, like a fog that just refused to lift. I glanced over at John, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his jaw clenched in this tight line. Something about this guy just didn't add up, but I quickly pushed that thought aside. It's the worst thing that could happen, right? It's only an hour away. "So, what happened with your girlfriend?" I asked. John just looked over at me with this pure disdain. "It's not really any of your business," he said back. I nodded and bit my lip, already feeling like this was a huge mistake. Why the hell did I bother to pick him up anyway? I was a young man with relatively new age ideals, and I thought I was doing a service for my fellow man by just giving him a ride. Looking back, it was stupid, because I know I only picked him up because he was young. Figured young people were safer. The reality was, there was no one more dangerous or unpredictable than some 19 or 20-year-old kid. We rode in silence for a bit. I felt put off, like I'd lost control of the interior of my own car. I felt like I was being held hostage by this guy's weird, brooding presence. So I did the one thing that I was good at. I kept talking. "So, your girlfriend, what's she gonna do if she beats you home?" John scoffed and shook his head. What won't she do? Fucking crazy bitch, he said, looking out the window. She'll flip the whole place upside down, steal all my shit, even the dog, and then break anything she doesn't seem valuable enough to take. Damn, was all I could say. Yeah, so if you could hurry the fuck up, that'd be great, John said a little louder than necessary. I settled into my new seat, rolled my new problem around in my head. How the hell was I going to deal with all this? There was probably no way to get him out of the car now that he was inside it. And it's not like I could call the cops to my car out here in the middle of nowhere over a person I voluntarily allowed to get in my vehicle. I had very limited options to deal with this asshole, but I fancied myself a college student, a pretty smart guy, so I resolved just to figure it all out. As I punched the gas pedal around the corner and cruised from 65 to 75, the answer hit me. Do exactly as he said, just hurry up. We were already 15 minutes into the drive, well outside of city limits. There was less than a half an hour of driving left. I'd drop him off the second we hit town and call it a wash. No harm, no foul. As I started hauling ass, he got a little bit more normal. It was almost like I was on his level now. We started talking a little bit. He told me that he and his girlfriend were from Washington or somewhere far away, but had been scoping out my state to see if they'd enjoy living here. They were staying with John's cousin in some small town out near where my hometown was. While checking out the neighborhoods in the city, they had their disagreement. John's girlfriend left him on the side of the road. He walked to the edge of the city, where the heat and nothingness took over, jammed his thumb out, and that's where I found him. I pressed a little further for some juicier details, as I could tell this guy was a chronic asshole. Was wondering if he'd done something to warrant being left behind. Sure enough, totally copped to it. He said that while they were looking around at houses, they ran out of drugs. Meth, I would assume. And she had a desire to re-up the supply. John wanted to keep looking at houses, still riding his high. And that's when it all started. Within an hour, they were having a shouting match, and apparently, John slapped his girlfriend around a bit because she knew what she was saying. It was really unclear, kind of very vague, but the gist was that John claimed his girlfriend to have some secret way of talking shit to him. Because it was so hurtful, he had a good reason to put hands on her. It was some of the most batshit craziest stuff I'd ever heard. The guy that was sitting next to me was like Joe Cool, literally bragging about smacking around a girl. I suddenly felt very guilty for bringing him closer to her at all. Still, I ponied at a cool 80 miles per hour, rocketing to my hometown and hopefully away from this crazy situation. I didn't do much more talking that last 20 miles, just gripping and ripping the wheel, went as fast as my car could allow. It was going so fast that John was literally sliding around in the seat, gripping the handle above his head. We blew into town and I drove to the first place that I could think of, the local police department. It was an old brick building on the corner of Main Street, very inconspicuous. So I just talked a bit to distract John as I pulled in. I shifted in reverse and quickly gestured to the building and said, "Here you are." "The fuck is this?" he asked me. "I thought you said you'd take me to my house. This isn't even the right town." "Sorry, man, this is where I live, so it's as far as I'm gonna go. I figure you might be able to get a ride or use a phone here." "The fuck is this even, a police station?" I nodded. "I am not getting out of the car," he said with a smile. "No way." "Okay, fair enough. I wouldn't either if I was a woman beater piece of shit," I said, adrenaline in my voice, chest pumping hard. I'd never spoken to a stranger this way, and honestly, thought it was going to come to blows. "What? Is that what this is about? I told you to mind your business." "I am minding my business. Now get the fuck out of my car." John nodded and looked around for an option of any kind. All he found was the door handle. "You're lucky you're smart too. If you pulled this shit anywhere outside of town, I'd saw your head off and steal your car," he said with a smile. "It's what I did to the last guy. At this point, my legs were shaking. He was out of the car, so I wanted to quickly create that distance. I looked behind him, at the police station, doing something of a pump fake to make him think that there was cops coming up behind us. Totally worked. He whirled around and I punched the gas, backed up and rolled onto the street. Didn't even check for traffic behind me. I drove off, did circles through town for a bit just to make sure there was no chance this guy saw the direction I went home in. He didn't really tell me or do anything crazy after that. He was in a police parking lot after all. He just stared me down, and that was the last time I ever saw him. The weirdest part of it all to me was that he didn't look or even really act like a drug addict. He could have passed for a totally normal guy, totally sober. It probably helped him when he needed to lie about whacking his girlfriend around. I honestly hope that asshole never made it home. When I look back at one of my hitchhiking adventures, I now realize just how lucky I was that I wasn't raped or murdered. At the time, I was having fun in the 60s. Never considered anything really bad could ever happen to me. I mean, come on. It was the decade of free love and acceptance. New Agers and hippies were trying to see the beauty in life, not the heinous. Sometimes being naive could blind someone to the realities of life, or even certain situations like hitchhiking. I have to give you a little background before you read about the truly scary part of my story. The summer after high school, I worked at my parents' gas station and trade for tuition at a business school in the fall. I tried to be good, but got myself kicked out shortly after I mastered typing and lost the art of shorthand. Whereas this has always been a valued skill, it was really all I learned. So I didn't apply, finding another job. In 1969, the lure of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, coupled with this teenage angst and hormones, gave me one choice: grab life by the balls and run as fast as you can. I kissed the hippie lifestyle and embraced every romantic notion to become a full-blown hippie. Headbands, smoking pot, listening to music the society deemed unacceptable, entertaining ideas of a different age. I moved down the road a little bit to Eugene, Oregon, a university town with a football team and everything. It was a bit of a culture shock, but with my new perspective on life, a culture shock was kind of what I was looking for. I wanted things to be new, different, and above all, exciting. My very first communal house was on a gate street, just blocks away from the student union, also known as the cannabis campus. I didn't hitchhike around town much because I was young and walked or just got a ride with rich friends that had cars. I saved myself for the righteous times at the coast, and that was only about an hour away. I stick out my thumb, hitch a ride in a slug bug with hippies that share their brew and pot. Sometimes I would even get invited to gnarly parties with hunks and jamming music. What a gas this is. True story, my best friend and I decided we were stoked to go to the coast and watch the sunset. A big hulking greaser type guy picked us up in his Dodge Charger muscle car and took us the final 20 miles. He'd recently come home from Vietnam, and even though we weren't warmongers, he thought we'd be stoked to show him a groovy time. We partied for a long time with a bonfire on the beach, wieners on a stick, and some boss weed. She married that man. And you know what else? After her brother came home from Vietnam, I married him. We both got divorced, but she's still my best friend after 50 years of growing up and now growing old. I hitched mostly alone. Went to places like San Francisco just to say I did so. Other times, when someone would want to go somewhere, I'd offer to be the freak in charge, guiding us down a major highway with our thumbs out. It never soaked in past my drug-dilated eyes that something bad might have happened to us on one of these trips. I was, and still am, naively confident that I can take care of myself. Nevertheless, sometimes things happen that scare me now a lot more than they did back then. This was another time, and a different friend that wanted to go down to Cucamonga, California. When she said the name, I thought she was screwing with my head, and I told her I needed to see the sign before I believed it was such a stupid name. That's how easy it was to find somewhere out of sight to waste our time. If it had a weird enough name, that was a reason to spend a weekend hitching there. We beat feet on a hot summer day. The rides were short, but so was the wait time. I suspect our perky, youthful attitude was apparent in her big boobs and my cute ass. I know what you're thinking, that I'm exaggerating, but these were the real bartering pieces of the road. When we hitchhiked with a man in our company, we had to do our best to hide the freaking guy, because we knew girls were more likely to get picked up. Once we got a car to stop, put our bubbling faces up in the window, the driver didn't care if it was a guy or two, as long as a lady sat up front to do the entertaining. But if it was just me, or one or two of my pretty friends with nice bodies, we were flying down the highway, having people fight to give us a ride. That is such a scary thought to me now. What the hell were we doing? Exposing our bodies on the street in order to get a stranger to stop. Like I said at the start, I'm truly amazed that I was never murdered. Around Medford, we could see the Siskiyou mountain range and was ready for cooler temperatures and a change of scenery. Our last ride was a bug with working windows and primo weed. We were having a blast, excited about catching some California rays. Along comes this fancy new F-100. We peace signed each other for luck. This truck would surely have some AC, and the chrome dome would be safe. I slid to the middle. My friend squished her tall frame next to the door. Less than 10 miles down the road, this guy starts talking in riddles. I love the way this generation accepts everybody, is open-minded about new things. He said some stuff about how it's okay to smoke that wacky weed, even though he preferred getting blitzed on bud. He rambles on and then explains how he's into flower power and free love. Out of nowhere and in a flash, his dick's out, and he asked, "You don't mind if I beat off, do you?" My face turned towards her. My eyes got so big they nearly popped out of their sockets. What the fuck? I said whatever, turned to look out the window. This was slowly turning into a nightmare. This was real danger, and I don't have any means of escape. I'm literally sitting right next to this psycho. We were flying down the road at 80 miles per hour. Even if we had to jump, we'd be nothing but a blood stain on the road when it was all said and done. He's booking it at freeway speeds. His right hand is doing the Johnson jerk at the speed of light. Thankfully, it's over pretty fast, and he goes right back to talking about politics or music or something else. He was all smiles, completely polite when he dropped us off a few miles down the road. When his sperm-white truck disappeared over the hill, we dropped to our knees in a laughter that was mixed with hysteria and a little paranoia. We still had a long way to go, needed to flip-flop our head away from Peter Guy and towards the bitchin' times ahead. Whenever I swap stories with hitchhikers, this is definitely the most common one that I hear. It's like everybody who's ever stuck their thumb out, man or woman, has ended up on the wrong end of some driver wanking it. It's super weird. I think it has to do with the power of actually driving the car, but who knows? It's fortunate that most of my trips were playful and exposed me to some interesting people. I was pretty insulated inside my rural community. The college town itself had very little diversity. I know how naive it sounds, but I met my first out-of-the-closet gay as a 19-year-old. It was the wee hours in the morning on the outskirts of Chicago. I figured I would be standing by the exit rail till dawn. It was bone cold. I was dead tired. Misery level 4 had just kicked in. Then, I see a car coming out of the fog. It slows down and stops directly in front of me. I didn't even have to run down the road, wondering if they would take off again when I got close. Sometimes assholes thought it was fun making the stupid hippie run because, well, they always did. Anyway, they were cool heads, only a few years older than me. At first, they started to banter like they were movie mobster types. I'm not scared, I'm wearing my gifted paracord bracelet. I'm just an organ hick, and these boys were deciding to educate me in the moment. It turned out one guy was an actor and they were coming home from a play. They were going to a party at home with wine and hash and offered the couch if I wanted to rest. At this time of night, it sounded like a utopian dream, and I sure as hell hoped that they shared that hash. We continued driving through the well-lit streets to where the worn-out buildings are kept. I remember the stairwell was so narrow that my backpack banged against the walls. My goofy giggle echoed my awkwardness. I don't remember exactly how far up it went, but I do remember that they had this tiny window that looked out onto a neighborhood that before tonight I never knew existed. God, I was so young and unseasoned about big city ways. The night unfolded with some wine, and they didn't bogart the hash. It was weird how these guys never mellowed out. They geared up and became the most outrageously campy gays I've ever met, like right out of a movie. They got more and more wild, more and more feminine, before eventually clothes start flying off. I partied as long as my hazy brain could last, but too much too soon, and I had to crash. I lay on the couch loaded to the max, trying to absorb all the groovy expressions and stories being flown around. I felt so grown up, hanging with all these city people, and wanted to season myself with their worldly ways. I tucked that memory in tight, and felt like the flavor of me had just gotten a little spicier. This experience was only scary because at one point I woke up and two of them were trying to tie my hands behind my back. I yanked free and asked what they were doing, to which they both got very embarrassed and started acting weird. They gave some form of excuse, something like they were practicing for another play scene, and involved tying up a person on the floor. I said whatever and went back to bed, but part of me thinks I might have interrupted something spooky back then. I do have another trip that got way too hairy. It was made worse by the Buffalo City Pigs, calling my parents in Oregon at midnight. What had their freaky firstborn done now? It was barely dark and a passenger car had picked me up just outside of Buffalo. He said he was going to Albany, which would be a choice ride. Usually the truckers are the only ones with the long freeway stretches. The locals were the hip hop around or go through the big cities. To get into a nice cozy car and get told it's going to be for a few hours, that's good luck, man. The guy was just a typical dude. It didn't bother me when he said he had to jump off the freeway for a minute, check a construction site that he was running. He went down the exit about a mile or so, pulled into this little closed business parking lot. He turned off the car and as fast as a rattlesnake, grabbed my wrist. The fuck is going on with this guy? What happened next is one of those many impossibilities that have happened in my lifetime. My right hand grabbed for the door handle. At least one leg was reaching for the ground. Out of nowhere, a cop pulls up on my side. The guy immediately lets go. I yanked my backpack over the seat and was safe outside of the car in just a moment. I should have felt grateful. I was saved from getting raped or even murdered, but mostly I just felt panic. Oh shit. I got a joint in my pocket. How do I get rid of this? Since nothing really happened, I thought when I told the cop what the guy did, he would let me go. Maybe slap the guy around a little bit. No, the fucking pig decided I was lying about everything. Told the guy to take off and he would take care of me. This nightmare scenario was getting worse, as the guy that was clearly about to hurt me had just got let off the hook. Whatever consequence was coming had my name written on it now. I wasn't handcuffed, but I sat in the back of the car. I never found a time where I could eat or ditch the joint. I expected I'd be going to jail, well, forever. I was really sweating back there, as I knew there wouldn't be a quick way out. There's no sticking my thumb out this time, or getting carried away in a stranger's car. I was already in a stranger's car, and that act alone might fuck up my life forever. Thankfully, he didn't search me, but did call my parents and let them know what their daughter was doing. I can only imagine the helpless anguish they must have felt, as they didn't tell my parents that I was hitchhiking. They told my parents I was a hooker, soliciting sex in back alleys. I mean, that's what it looked like with the guy in the car, I guess. Now, my relationship with my folks is on the line. This was actually the scariest part of the story, though. Being alone with that cop. It was just me and that one officer. After he got done with whatever he needed to do to secure the scene, he came back and opened up my door, told me to get out. Whoa, no way. I guess this is my lucky day. Maybe he is letting me go. Wrong. He looked me up and down a couple of times, even asked me to spin around, then made some of the most disgusting threats I've ever heard. Explained exactly what he wanted to do to me, how hard he'd do it. Just that typical slimeball stuff. It was scary again because I was powerless in this situation. This guy could do whatever he wanted to do, shoot me even, lie, and he would never see the inside of a jail cell. All I could do was take his threats and hope to God they stopped right there. After that, he put me in the back of the car, drove me to the station. While we drove, he reached a hand in the back seat like he wanted to cop a feel. But I was done being a pushover. I'd scream, bite one of his fingers if one of them wormed their way over to my legs for a little touch. Got to the station unmolested, where I was led into a holding room. I sat in a hallway for a few hours. Eventually, they let me walk out the front door and down the road. I found a little hidden spot behind this dumpster, decided just to lean back, smoke the evidence, and let well enough alone for the night. There was clearly no help to be had in the city, nobody I could turn to, so being on the street kind of frightened me. I wouldn't be caught walking around in the dark, so I just hid back there till sunrise, then did my best to hustle a safe ride home. I was young, clueless about how dangerous hitchhiking could be. I was so mad at that cop in the moment for getting me in trouble with my parents that it didn't even dawn on me what predicament I had just escaped. Clearly that man had driven me to some seedy back alley area of the city. It was gonna hurt me back there. How bad, I can't say for sure. But I will say, I later learned and found out that that area was a known site to dump off prostitutes. There were probably dead girls back there while I was getting arrested. That's how bad that area was. When you read this or hear this, I'm sure you're yelling or saying to yourself, "Stop. What the hell is wrong with you, girl?" It's true, I had a lot more miles notched in my backpack than friends, but it seemed like my niche. Also, these were much different times when peace and love was the slogan, and challenging the status quo was the decree. I indulged in lots of pot and hallucinogens, but never really got caught up in the hard drugs. I didn't trust myself. Still, I wouldn't change 1 minute during this 2.5-year stage of my life. Honestly, I wish I had the stamina and a long weekend to do it all over again. Even if I still look back and shudder. While hitching from London across to France, my girlfriend at the time and I made the mistake of trying to catch a lift on the M20 off-ramp. We'd seen plenty of people hitching here before, didn't really think much of it. It was the busiest roadway leading in the direction that we were attempting to travel in. The issue is, we'd never actually hitchhiked before. We ultimately had no idea what we were doing. A security car pulls up with wailing sirens. The yellow-jacketed man jumps out, barks at us to put our bags down and wait for the police. Not long after that, a police car comes along, and 2 friendly young policemen get out and tell us that we're not allowed to hitchhike here. They ended up giving us a lift to the port at Dover, where we caught a ferry across to Calais. Those police lads seemed to be pretty understanding, especially after we had words face to face and they could see we were just a harmless couple trying to travel for free. They offered what advice they could give us while they drove us to the port, even gave some more advice after we landed in France. They were very understanding, got us on the right foot towards our ultimate destination. Our real mistake was not finding an onward lift from our fellow travelers whilst on the ferry. You see, the boat was packed to the brim with all manner of cars and travelers, most of which were paired up. We were the only people on the boat that didn't have a ride the second we hit the port in France. Instead of networking during the ferry ride and securing a ride to the next township, we just sat with one another and chatted. By the time we crossed the channel, the other travelers were loaded up into their cars and ready to hit the road. Getting off the ferry at Calais, we walked out of the port and stood on the on-ramp with our thumbs out, holding out a cardboard sign with our destination stenciled on it in thick black pen. We're headed for Austria ultimately, with a deadline to meet family. Traveling more conventionally in Salzburg. Definitely a naively optimistic idea to have a date in mind when you're hitching long distance. As we walk out to get into our hitchhiking position, we watch with this growing realization as everybody just simply rolls on by in their car. By the time we got set up to begin our song and dance, literally everybody with a car had already driven out of the port. The problem, our problem, immediately becomes obvious. The port is designed to get cars straight off the ferry and onto the motorway. It doesn't lead anywhere else, so once every half an hour or so, we'd get a single wave of cars rushing by. The rest of the time, zilch. And again, these are people with a schedule of their own, trying to quickly race off the ferry, through town, and into the mainland. We don't have much of a choice, so we just stand there, watching each pack of cars stream past us, no one even slowing or looking in our direction. We'd arrived early in the afternoon, and soon it began to get dark, making hitching impossible, even dangerous. At this point, we were along a coast in a country that we aren't from. No one seems interested in lending us a hand. This is when the trip started to take a turn and our energy teetered on that of defeat. We debated trying to get back into the port and catch a bus into Calais, but it's getting late. So we decided to camp on the coast and just try again the next day. This was kind of scary at first. We didn't know what to expect, it being dark. But we were committed to whatever lay in store for us. I was doing everything in my power to remain positive, even if it was just for my partner's sake. But I could see the situation starting to take a toll on her. Once we reached the dunes along the coast, we realized that this stretch of coast is where all the migrants and refugees who want to get across to England camp out. It's a huge space for temporary travelers of every variation. Some folks had been there for weeks or even months, it seemed like. A whole little community with its own economy, literally thriving right there on the fringes of the desert. It gave us a little bit of comfort, as there were plenty of women and children around. There didn't seem to be a huge cause for alarm from bandits or even thieves. Just generally good-intentioned people waiting for their turn to travel. So there we are, 2 young Israelis in our little tent, surrounded by Arabic-speaking families and lots of young men. I'm sure we're completely safe, but we don't feel it inside that tent, with so many strangers around us. It was unsettling, but also kind of disarming because none of them seemed to be dangerous or scared themselves. We just relaxed, cuddled, and slowly drifted off to sleep. In the dead of the darkness, though, I heard the last thing that I wanted to hear. Somebody fumbling with our zipper. I awoke and just laid there, listening for a moment, before my girlfriend then woke up and jostled me, urging me to take some form of action. I cleared my throat and shouted at the top of my lungs that our tent was occupied. We were armed inside and prepared to call the police. The person outside immediately let go of the zipper once I said this, and I could tell they were alone. No speaking, no communication otherwise. I told them to leave and not return to our tent, and that's what they seemed to do. No more issues for the rest of that night. I don't know what they wanted, but it was beyond bizarre. It had to be a thief of some kind, right? Perhaps even worse. I think the fact that I was so loud drove them off immediately, not so much the threats. We were camped by some families that seemed to be good-natured, so yelling of any kind would be sure to get somebody else's attention. A few months later, we read in the papers that the police had raided the Calais encampment. People were beaten, tents trashed. This didn't happen to us, but I imagine it was terrifying for anyone caught in the chaos. The next morning, we woke up not feeling very refreshed, decided to try out hitchhiking again. We chose a spot where there was room to pull over, enough of a straight for people to see us and then slow down. It was the most logical place for us to stick our thumbs out. It also got us away from the majority of the desert dwellers that we just spent the night with. We spent that morning getting cleaned up and presentable, as that was key in my mind. Clean travelers seemed to be more likely to get picked up. 8 a.m., whoosh. Dozen cars whizzed by. 8:30, whoosh. 9 a.m., whoosh. 9:30, 10, 11, noon, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. We were getting seriously demoralized by now. Out of our 4 days to get to Salzburg, we spent the first day and a half standing in Calais. This is before cell phones. No way to let our family know that we were running late or even if we're okay. It was starting to dawn on me that this was a mistake. We were potentially stranded without any idea of how long it would take us to get back. 1 p.m. comes and goes. 2 p.m. the same. Nobody even slows down. My girlfriend at this point is just sitting dejectedly on our bags, while I try to look cheerful. Nobody's gonna stop for miserable looking hitchhikers. At this point though, there are large enough gaps in between the rushes of cars. And for some reason, the ferry traffic was slowing down, and with it, our chances of getting a ride anywhere. I could feel the hungry, prying eyes of the desert-dwelling campers behind us, eager for us to return to the camp for the night, so they could try their hand at raping or robbing us. This isn't any kind of racial slight, it's just the reality on the road. Bad things can happen to hitchhikers going international. 2:30, nothing. 3 p.m., nothing. The usual wave of cars just whizzing by us. But then, out of nowhere, a squealer brakes. A big black BMW at the rear of the pack comes to a complete stop, a good 300 meters beyond us. Everybody else disappears over the horizon as our savior slams into reverse and accelerates the whole way, then squeals to a stop right next to us. "Get in!" Our Czech hero, his wife beside him, handed him a Red Bull every 100 kilometers. I don't remember their exact business, but the couple seemed pretty well off, affluent, and very, very busy. In hindsight, I think they were high, probably on coke or some other stimulant. They talked loud and fast, and were interested in any kind of discussion. I will call the driver Jacob and his wife Kat. Jacob's foot is lead heavy. He has a radar jammer to foil police speed traps, and he does not go below 200 kilometers all the way through France and Belgium to Frankfurt, which is where he dropped us off. And I'll admit it felt only like 10 minutes later, but was actually 600 kilometers closer to our destination. To say that we were flying was a drastic understatement, but we were grateful either way. Jacob decided to stop here and stretch his legs, while Kat used the toilets inside. While we unloaded and eyeballed the area, another big black BMW came over, and Jacob started having words with the driver in a language that we didn't speak. Before Kat even returned, both hatches lifted. Jacob and that stranger began unloading duffel bags and suitcases from the car that we were just in, then loading them into the other BMW that had just rolled up. Some kind of bait and switch. The cars were literally identical. Even the drivers looked similar. It was honestly kind of funny to watch, like a pair of cartoon characters. As we unpacked our own stuff and slowly moved across the parking lot, we watched as a nearby policeman took interest in the pair of blacked out BMWs. At first, it just started out like a basic line of questioning, but within 10 minutes, a whole fleet of investigators descended on the Czechs and their suspicious vehicles. My wife and I watched in horror as the police exposed Jacob and Kat as drug runners or illegal transporters of some kind. I never saw what was in the bags, but by the sudden turnout of the law enforcement, I knew it had to be drugs or guns getting taken over the border, and we were just sitting in the car with them. Had we pulled over, especially with Jacob's erratic driving, we'd all be under arrest. And God only knows for how long until things got cleaned up. Jacob was a godsend for us, but by the end, the real fortune was being able to step away before he went down in the books. Our next lift came much faster now that we were on real roadways, with a friendly truck driver pulling up not 30 minutes later. He welcomed us in, and the cab actually smelled fresh and clean, with hints of herbs that he liked to cook in there. My wife was run ragged by the road, and she wore it all over her face. So the truck driver was kind enough to let her sleep in the bunk in the back of the cab. She did not hesitate to climb right in and promptly fall asleep. That just left me and the trucker, and we'll call him Johann. He was, I believe, a German citizen based on his looks and dialect. But across the sprawling board of Europe, it's hard to be sure of anybody's heritage. We listened to music at first, but he quickly grew bored and decided to talk with me instead. We shared our basic pleasantries, where we were from, how he started trucking, and why we were hitchhiking. It was all a very simple discussion, and as we talked, Johan asked me some basic things about my wife as well, which I answered, not thinking much of it. We rolled on to Munich, and the driver explained to me that this was all a very healthy hub for travelers going in any direction. Getting to Austria would be what he called smooth sailing. We'd easily find a ride within a couple of hours. Finally, this trip had turned into everything I wanted it to be. He then explained he was headed in a different direction, so he could no longer help us. I thanked him a million times over, explained that he had literally saved our entire trip. And he was very fortunate to have the company still. I tipped him what I thought was a respectable sum of cash, the least I could do. Except from the driver's perspective, it really wasn't. He rolled his truck into a service station, further explained that we could possibly find a ride even without leaving the parking lot. Lots of truckers would be going through Austria and would even be able to help for free or for a decent price. I slowly was getting my things together, half listening, also preparing to wake my wife. It wasn't until I turned my focus on Johan for a minute that I noticed he'd unzipped his pants and began stroking himself. I sat there, completely stunned, unsure of what I was seeing was actually real. He didn't even blink, just continued to talk, casually looking at me and out the window. I didn't bother asking, clearly this was part of whatever plan the trucker had in place. I gathered all of our bags and shouted my wife's name to wake up. It was time to leave. Johan becomes immediately agitated, saying he let her use the bed. The least we could do was stick around to break it in with him. I honestly wasn't sure if he wanted to have sex with me or my wife or both of us. Maybe he just wanted to watch. Whatever the case, we were literally trapped inside the cab of this man's truck as he continued to pleasure himself and slowly undress. My wife hopped up, confused but alert, simply followed me through the passenger door. Johan never shouted, he didn't grab at us. I guess he knew better. He knew we were already creating a scene. He even kind of apologized through the door as I closed it in his face, turned my back on his truck, and hurried my wife to the trucking station. There were all manner of what seemed like normal people to create this buffer between ourselves and that creepy truck driver. From there, I guess it really was smooth sailing. We reached our destination well before the deadline. After that trip, though, my wife and I swore off hitchhiking forever. She still to this day doesn't know how close we came to trouble in that cab. She just knows something was about to happen. It's my job to protect her, just like it was that day, even if it's just from the strange, ugly truths.